Thank you all so much for joining us again. I've said it a million times beforehand, but I'll do it one more time. My name is Phil Harrinarine, and I lead the admissions office here at Villanova Law. I'm excited about this panel in particular because this one is special. We brought in alumni from the law school who are here to speak about their experiences with you all, to share about not only their time here as a student, but all the great work that they've been doing since graduating. These are all students that I actually overlapped with when I was a student here. So it's kind of neat to be able to see them doing really wonderful work, things that they're super passionate about. It makes obviously the world of a difference. And so I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. If you can say your name, the year you graduated, maybe where you went to undergrad, and then what you have been doing since you graduated from Villanova, and then we'll get started with some of our questions. The one thing I will say to our attendees is that you all should feel free to throw any questions you have into the Q&A box. Our alumni are definitely more than willing to answer your questions. I think actually they probably want to hear from you all so that we can kind of get to your questions more so than maybe answering some of the questions that I threw together for them. To get started, maybe I'll go to Nate Simon first. So, because we have two Nate S's, right? So we'll do Nate, and then we'll go to Katie, and then Nate, and then Omeed to wrap it up. But yeah, just name where you went to undergrad, what year you graduated, and what you've been doing since you graduated.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So yeah, Nate Simon, Nate Stanger and I were actually in the same class, so we're used to the whole Nate-S confusion. I graduated from Villanova in 2018, did my undergrad at Gettysburg College in Central PA, and I'm currently an associate at Kessler Topaz Meltzer and Check, which is a class action firm based in Radnor. It's down the street from the law school, where I work on securities fraud matters brought under 10b-5 of the federal securities laws. Before coming to work at Kessler Topaz, I clerked for Judge Mark Kearney in federal court in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. So happy to be here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Albanese. I did my undergrad at NYU and I got my master's at Duke before coming to Villanova Law and graduating in 2019. I practiced for a few years as a patent attorney at Greenberg Traurig in New York, and I am currently, actually tomorrow's the last day of my clerkship in the Eastern District of Texas, where they hear about 25% of the patent cases in the country. And then I'll be going back to Greenberg Traurig in the patent litigation group.
Hi, I'm Nate Stanger. I went to McGill University undergrad. I took a couple years off before law school, working in forestry for the New York City Parks Department. And then I went to Villanova. I graduated in 2018. I went to Ballard Spahr, established Philly law firm. After graduation, I was there for about 3 years. And then I went in-house 2 years ago to MetLife Investment Management, which is the asset management arm of MetLife Insurance Company that manages insurance premiums for its general account and for third-party insurance company clients. I can go into that a little more later on what exactly that means.
Hi, everyone. My name is Omeed Firouzi, and I graduated from Villanova Law in 2018. So I was in the class with the Nates, although I believe we were in a different section in 1L year. And ever since I graduated, I have been here at Philadelphia Legal Assistance as a staff attorney in our tax unit. So I represent low-income folks who have disputes with the IRS, individuals in Philadelphia who are living in poverty, who have controversies with the IRS. So we represent individuals who are being audited or misclassified as independent contractors, or who owe the IRS and need to get into collection alternatives to deal with their IRS debt. We represent people in tax court cases, and we're just one unit among various units within Philadelphia Legal Assistance. We're a legal aid nonprofit, so we have consumer housing, family law, unemployment compensation, medical legal partnership, among other units. And for undergrad, I went to George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you all for your introduction. So I guess before moving into questions, I guess as a sort of recap, hearing you all sort of share about your experiences, one, it's really exciting, of course, to see all that you've been able to do since graduating. We have individuals here who have clerked for federal judges, individuals that have worked at large firms. Simon is at, let's say, in essence, a smaller firm that does some pretty powerful and impactful class action work. Nate Stanger is working in-house, and you have Omeed that's doing public interest work. So you have a lot of bases covered here amongst these four alumni, and I think they could sort of speak to it generally, that a lot of their peers as well are off doing really wonderful and fantastic work in the Philadelphia area, in other areas geographically as well. Things change when you graduate from law school. Maybe you think you want to do something when you're in law school, and then sort of your perspective shifts over time. And that's kind of the first question that I want to ask you all. And I guess I won't ask anybody in particular, but maybe if somebody wants to just volunteer to answer, maybe two of you. The question is, did you have particular career ambitions coming into law school? And did you at all expect to be where you are now when you were, let's say, a 1L, or maybe even somebody that was admitted and going to start law school? Does anybody want to maybe volunteer to take that one and share a little bit?
I'm happy to start with that one. So yeah, I mentioned that I worked for the New York City Parks Department for a couple of years before law school. I thought when I was going to law school that I'd do environmental law. I have like an environmental background. I was very interested in environmental issues. And then, as I was going through law school and I did my summer associate stint, I realized that I really didn't want to do litigation. And it was a somewhat litigation heavy regulatory practice, and I was into the transactional work. So I ended up in a transactional practice, not at all where I thought I'd be. I probably didn't even know. I currently do a lot of project finance work, not at all what I thought I'd be doing. And I didn't even know it was a practice area really until I kind of started doing it. But I actually work on financing projects in the renewable space and in environmentally beneficial plants and such. So it was a bit of a circuitous route to doing something that I actually really wanted to do, but I didn't know was a practice area.
I have kind of a similar story. My undergrad and graduate degrees were both in physics. So I came in with the idea that I was probably going to do patent law. And that's sort of why I went to law school. We got the talk at the very beginning of our graduate program that said, anything you invent is ours, and you're going to be the inventor on our patent, but you assign it to us. And that was all very interesting to me. And unlike Nate, I thought I wanted to go into transactional work. I spent my first summer during law school drafting patents for IBM, and I realized that I didn't like doing that side of it, and I'd rather do the litigation side. And so that's kind of how I ended up at a big firm that still gives me the opportunity to draft patents if I really want to, but I don't really want to. So I do the litigation side, but I didn't ever think that clerking would be in my future. It was definitely something that was encouraged at Villanova, and a lot of our professors had some pretty amazing clerkships under their belt, and just always talked about how incredible of an experience it is. And so I'm very, very glad that I've gotten to do it, but it's definitely the big firm litigation and then clerkship route was not what I envisioned when I got to law school.
So I can speak next here, and I have always been, as most of the people on this panel know, a political junkie, and so I was always interested in these issues related to social policy and anti-poverty programs and how they work and the politics and history behind them. And I had taken courses in undergrad at GW about income inequality and the war on poverty and social welfare. And a lot of that is through the tax code, actually. The federal tax code includes a lot of anti-poverty programs. And I had written a paper in senior year of college about the earned income tax credit and how it's an effective anti-poverty tool. So I had this pre-existing interest in how the tax code intersects with poverty and how a lot of the anti-poverty framework is within the tax code. So I knew that I wanted to be involved also generally in public interest because I was interested in these issues and how these programs assist poor people. And so then at Villanova Law, I got acquainted with the PIPS Fair which is a job fair where you have a lot of public interest, public service organizations interviewing law students for summer internships. And I saw that the Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic at Philadelphia Legal Assistance was interviewing. And so I thought that seems right up my alley, given the interest that I had. And so I interviewed and I ended up interning in this office summer of 2016. And now I'm here as an attorney. So in fact, when I first started in 2018 on a fellowship here, I had the same exact office I had when I was an intern. And even today, still, I have the same supervising attorney I had back then. So that general interest in social policy, anti-poverty programs, how to use the law to assist poor people is a general interest I have. I had no idea, that where specifically I would end up, and I really didn't have a good sense of what civil legal aid was before I got to law school. But that's where law school came in, of course, then to fill in the gaps of, okay, here's the kind of thing that you want to do. And in fact, I remember I went to a incoming class of 2018 social event at some firm in Center City in June 2015. And I spoke with Professor Agard there, and he was like, "Oh, what are you interested in?" Mentioning public interest in civil rights and these things. And notably, this was right before Obergefell was decided, the marriage equality case. And he said, I have a lot of students who, come to me and they say they're interested in civil rights and LGBTQ rights equality. I tell them that tax law is actually very important for that. You wouldn't think about that. And he was right because of, the fact that, that was a major benefit in terms of, that LGBTQ couples were being denied, that they weren't able to file as married because they couldn't get married and thus couldn't get those same benefits that everyone else got. And so I remember that conversation kind of sticking out to me, and here I am 8 years later, and I think he's absolutely right. So it's interesting to trace back and think about moments like that.
Yeah, I can jump in quickly. I didn't have as concrete of interests and backgrounds as my esteemed fellow panelists did, but I was interested. I had worked at a law firm before going to law school, and I was just interested generally in what lawyers did, what lawyers do, written and spoken analysis and reading comprehension and, the art of persuasion. And I'd heard from some people, maybe my parents, that I had the personality of what could become a good trial lawyer personality. So, they weren't biased at all in that advice or that analysis. But in terms of specific, I had worked on some healthcare matters as a paralegal. I knew Villanova had a strong healthcare concentration, health law concentration. Something I was thinking about. I was generally interested in international law, something that I explored while at the school as well. But nothing. I don't even think I knew what securities law or what securities fraud was going into law school. So I'm glad I learned as a lawyer what it was, but not something that was really on my radar at all.
I was going to say maybe the moral of the story here, listening to both Nate's, is that coming into law school, you can have preconceived notions as to what you might want to do. At the same time, you might surprise yourself in terms of what actually does pique your interest. It might be like Katie, something that she thought she would do because of her background and went on to do that really successfully, but then you might also surprise yourself and end up exploring something completely different altogether. Nate, I want to come back to you to chat a little bit about your clerkship, and Katie could probably tag along a little bit too. But you graduated from Villanova. How long was it that you worked at your firm before you went to clerk?
So I was at a separate firm downtown for a year called Marshall Dennehy, doing healthcare, general liability matters. And then I clerked for Judge Kearney for a year. And now I've been at Kessler for about 2.5 years.
So when you look back on that time frame, your clerkship, is that something that you had secured prior to the end of law school? Is that something that you looked into doing? Same thing for you, Katie. Obviously for you, I think it's obviously more recent, but what made you say, gosh, I think I need to do this clerkship? How do you feel as though that's factored into career progression and or benefiting you now in the role that you currently have?
Yeah, so I mean, I clerked I interned for the judge after during 1L summer. So that's something that's a typical route. A lot of my colleagues while at Villanova interned for federal judges, state judges. So there are a lot of opportunities while a student, and it just so happens that sometimes when you build those relationships with the judge as an intern, it develops into something more, or that judge refers you to one of their friends who's on the bench. So in my case, I interned for the judge as a 1L summer, and developed a nice relationship with the judge. Expressed my interest in wanting to come back. The judge is a Villanova alum, so obviously has a vested interest in the careers of Villanova students and seeing them to successful careers. So I expressed my interest. I didn't get it right away, but at some point during 2L, I did get an offer from the judge. It was just a supremely impactful experience in my career. You're basically the legal advisor to a federal judge on all the issues that come across his desk. So that runs the gambit, from criminal matters to complex civil matters to, being in the box during trials and helping him rule on evidentiary issues. So, you carry that experience with you, long after the clerkship. So I use those skills that I developed that year with the judge, every day in my practice. And those are, technical writing skills, but also, just knowledge of the federal rules of civil procedure and, gearing up for trial and understanding the filings that go in and, how judges, and even the softer things, how judges perceive, certain styles of lawyers and certain, the styles of certain advocates. So it's, if you have the chance to clerk, I'll let Katie take the floor. It's just, it really is a great experience.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. In my case, we almost exclusively hear patent cases, and we almost exclusively get patent cases on our docket. I think in the Eastern District of Texas, or in the Marshall Division, I should say, about 5% of the docket is criminal cases. And so I still am very patent focused at this point. I've seen, I think, 12 trials in the past 12 months that I've been here, and they've all been patent cases. But like Nate said, it's a huge responsibility to have basically, I feel like I'm an associate on the case half the time with the amount of details that I know about what's going on in the case and, what issues are going to come up when. I actually had a lot of cases before Judge Gilstrap when I was working in practice. And so for me, it was, I never had an interest in clerking. I always thought, it sounds great. Everyone recommends it, but if I never clerk, that's okay. And my judge, and I think this is probably the case with a lot of judges, gets their clerks sort of on a word of mouth recommendation. They either ask lawyers that practice in front of them a lot, or professors that they know, or something like that. They ask for a recommendation. And so that's how I came to be here. I interviewed in June of 2020 and started my clerkship in March of 2022. But since being here, I think having the 3 or so years of experience in practice before coming here was incredibly helpful. And for me, a clerkship, although it's come to be sort of a very foundational and impactful part of what I hope my career will be, part of it was a career move. Clerkships definitely open up doors for you. And now when I go back to the firm and I have cases in front of this judge that I clerked for, I know exactly how I'm supposed to behave, and I know exactly what the filings are supposed to look like. And I know which expert witnesses do well on the stand and which don't in patent cases. And so it's been it's a pretty incredible experience, and I highly recommend it.
This is another general question that I think anybody can answer, but you all have sort of talked about what you're doing currently and sort of maybe also hinted at some of the things in law school that you took advantage of. This question relates more to law school, and so I'm going to make you sort of put on your like memory cap. But when you're thinking back to the time that you were a student here at Villanova Law, what would you sort of point to as being, and maybe it's one thing, maybe it's a couple of things that helped you to sort of navigate your path to finding what your true interests were. So in essence, I'm asking, where'd you find support, right? Was it through maybe the classes themselves? Was it through mentorship through a faculty member? Was it through maybe an alum? Was it through experiential learning, an externship, a clinic? Where would you say, and it doesn't have to be one thing, it could be more than one thing, but how did you find your way? What did you find most impactful as students here during your time at Villanova Law? And I guess whoever wants to answer can go ahead and do so.
I can start, and I would say it's all of the above. During the first public interest fair auction as a 1L, I happened to bid on something that only had the description dinner with IP attorneys. And I said, okay, I'll bid on that. That seems appropriate. And they were both Villanova alums that had both been adjunct professors at Villanova. And they've become lifelong mentors to me from my, I think I only bid like $50 and it won. So they really, I lucked out with that dinner. But speaking with them and having them as mentors, as well as taking every IP class that Villanova offered, which was actually quite substantial. And I also, like Nate did, I was clerking or externing in the District of Delaware in my, I think it was my 2L year. And the District of Delaware is also a very big patent destination. And so all of it, I kept my mind open to other topics just in case, you know, some other area of law really pulled me in that direction. But basically everything that I did at Villanova, including getting engaged with alumni by inviting, I was the president of the IP Society. And so I invited a lot of alumni to come and speak, and just sort of the conglomeration of all of that sort of solidified my desire to go into IP.
We'll go next here. So I had really great support from faculty. I had a wonderful advisor, Professor Michael Campbell, who I believe is retiring. He's just a very sweet man, a very Mr. Rogers-like figure. He has a great public interest career himself, and he gave me great advice and really was a role model as well, and gave me the lay of the land of who you want to be in touch with, what kind of work you want to do, how you want to approach different people in the community, and just like really good advice that was so indispensable because he knew the players and he knew how to go about entering into the public interest field. And the same can be said of other professors there who I got to know as well. So when I was applying for the fellowship that started my career here at Philadelphia Legal Assistance, I sought advice from professors there like Les Book, who's a tax professor. I was taking his class that year as well. He helped me a lot because he was familiar with the community where my fellowship was associated with, the American Bar Association tax section, that is. He was super helpful with that. I did a mock interview with several public interest law professors at Villanova Law who were very helpful there. And so I really was inspired by them, got a lot of good motivation from them. And also beyond that, just the practical experiential learning was super helpful as well. So I got involved with the CARES clinic there, the asylum clinic. I actually was in court more often for the CARES clinic than I have been as an actual attorney, because it's rare that you would be in court as a tax attorney. And so that was really critical experience that not only familiarized me with aspects of the specific law in terms of asylum and immigration, but also gave me really good experience and hands-on work that was really as if you were an attorney. I mean, you were doing so much work every week representing clients, and really getting that direct experience was so helpful. And the same can be said of other activities that I took on in law school, like moot court and the work that I did in an expungement clinic through Pro Bono Society. So all of that work was super helpful. And Katie mentioned the 10th auction. I would just put in a plug that I believe that that's this Saturday evening. And that community as well was very helpful to me in terms of getting involved in the extracurricular organizations like that, because that was part of getting into a good public interest career, was that a lot of the advice I got was you want to, it's important to get good grades, but also make sure that you're being involved and showing that you really are doing work during law school to get there. And so being part of the public interest fellowship program community and the Pro Law Society were a big part of that for me.
I don't want to cut the Nates off, but if nobody has anything else, I'll move over to something else. When you think about your time in law school now, and if I'm going to make you once again like look back a little bit, can you identify aspects of our program or community that you wish you had taken greater advantage of, or maybe something that you would say to incoming students, gosh, make sure you do this, or make time for that, or don't forget about this aspect of law school. Obviously, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of noise, right? And so it's hard sometimes to be mindful of the things that you should be making time for. But what are some, I guess, maybe it's advice in essence, but also maybe something that you'd say, gosh, do not forget to take advantage of this.
I do wish, considering I'm so laser focused on patent law, and I kind of was in law school, I do wish that I had gone to more events that were put on by sort of other groups that I may not really have interest in necessarily, but could learn something from. Because when my fellow panelists describe what they do, I don't even know what that means. Half the time. And so it's almost, I remember what I remember from law school, but I do wish that I had branched out just for the sake of knowledge. And yeah, that's one regret I have. And there are a lot of opportunities to do that. There are events every day, and the events usually come with free food. So, you have two birds with one stone.
I would say I don't really have a regret, because I think I did do this, but I would say that it is really important to like cultivate your friendships and relationships. I think, it's a time when it's a stressful time, and it's a time when everyone's kind of going through the same thing, and you really do bond with people and create strong relationships because you're all going through it together. And I have like lifelong friendships that I've made in law school that will like forever be in my life. And I think it's really important to take the time to cultivate those and value them. I was very focused on academics too, but I also spent a lot of time meeting people. And for me, I'm not from the Philly area, so everyone I met in law school was new. I didn't know anybody in the area. So, I think you get a lot of value out of that, aside from the academics and the professional, benefits that you'll get from going to law school. I think you really do make some great connections, and it should be something that, you're hopefully engaging in as well alongside the academics.
Yeah, two come to mind for me. Well, one is, Phil, you can chime in if she's still there, but Professor O'Hare, she's a preeminent scholar in securities law and taught a class called securities regulation, where it would have been nice to have taken that before embarking on my current career. And by all accounts, even when I was a student, it was like a must take. And for some reason I didn't take the class, and picked it up.
I would second that. That was actually my favorite class in law school. Just incredible.
There you go.
Nate, you should have done it.
I really should have, but picked it up. I had to teach myself, and would have been in much better shape had I taken that class. And then also, there's a lot of, you can't do it all in law school, unfortunately. There's a lot of there's a lot of competition for your time, your coursework, and then, if you're on a journal, and then if you have a job, if you are interning, so you really can't do it all. But I wish I had more closely considered fitting into my schedule or making time in my schedule for the trial team, It's just a great opportunity, it seems, to get those like reps, which if you're going into litigation, and especially civil litigation, you'll have a tough time. You'll see you may have a tough time just getting those opportunities as a younger lawyer, to speak up at hearings or in arguments with opposing counsel and even internally. So to take advantage of those opportunities while you're in law school and while they're available, and you have time for them, it might be something, if you're considering like that career path, it might be something to think about.
Similarly to Nate there, I wish that I had taken more tax courses before I became a tax lawyer. Now, I did get good experience through the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, which is through the Villanova Law Tax Society. I took one tax course, but I didn't take it till spring of 3L year. Wish I'd taken that earlier, and potentially maybe also could have done the tax clinic. Well, I did the tax clinic here as an internship instead. So it probably would have been useful to me, although of course I didn't know I would have ended up in that field specifically, and I learned valuable things from other experiences, but it probably would have been helpful to me. I also sort of wish I had done the Rome program. My wife ended up doing the Rome program through Temple Law in her summer of 1L year, and I was able to join her for a week there, and that was really cool, and she had a really great experience from it. So I guess I got to go to Rome anyway, but it would have I always regret that I didn't do any study abroad in college or law school, and pretty unusual for it to be offered in law school. So and the only other thing I would say is, like, this is a weird thing to say, but like, I wish that there's some couple classes where I wish I didn't take them because they were not good for my GPA. And everyone said, like, you got to take these classes to be ready for the bar exam. And but then you just learn those things anyway when you study for the bar, and getting better grades would have been perhaps better. But it all ended up working out, and I ended up being where I absolutely wanted to be anyway. So whatever, it was all part of the journey. But just take what you seem interested in, but also what you think would be useful and manageable as well.
I'd say, Omeed, that you are where you're meant to be, right? You really are, and you've done great work there the last couple of years. You actually hinted to something that I was going to bring up later on, but I'm going to bring it up right now. I get questions all the time from applicants, from admitted students that are wondering what a school, let's say Villanova, but just about any law school, is going to do to help prepare those students to, let's say, pass the bar exam. And what your response just now was, I think, is essentially what I end up saying to individuals. More than anything, I'm asking for you all to maybe give me a thumbs up or maybe a head nod if you're in agreement with what I'm about to say. But if somebody does have a thought or they'd like to interject quickly, feel free to do so. What I tell to individuals when they're considering law school is that in essence, it is a marathon. It's for 3 years, right? It does go by really quickly. But like Omeed said, you're going to be doing bar prep, which is in and of itself a completely different beast, right? It's a very, very challenging time, I think, in any law graduate's life, and bar prep really does prepare you for taking the bar exam. But while you're in law school, like Katie said, getting to take classes in areas that you think you might be interested in, that you know that you're interested in, and not just taking classes because they're bar tested, is definitely something that's important. You have a certain number of electives you can take in law school. And so in essence, not necessarily wasting all of your electives on classes just because they're bar tested, but taking classes that you're really passionate about. And then, of course, reserving some time on the back end for bar prep and giving it your best shot during those 3 months of studying is kind of like a good attitude or viewpoint into how to approach law school, and then separately bar prep. Would you all sort of second that or agree that view law school as 3 years where you can really explore things you're passionate about, and then take on bar prep when it's time to take on bar prep? Don't be stressed for 3 years about the bar exam, because it's going to come when it's going to come.
I would agree. The only thing I'd add is that I think, like, there are, and this is too early for you to be thinking about this, but there's a multiple choice section of the bar called the MBE, and then there's an essay portion. And the multiple choice section is basically everything you've learned in 1L. It's like all your 1L classes plus evidence. And so if you're someone like me who has no interest in doing litigation, and the thought of taking evidence is just like the most boring thing ever. I would still recommend taking it because it's an MBE subject. So it just makes it easier when it comes time to study for the bar, because it's not like completely foreign to you. I would say that's probably, for me, I would say that's the exception. But like all of the other courses, which are going to be essay topics, and there's like there's like 10, 15 other subjects. Like I agree. I don't think you need to spend the time stressing or worrying about that. Everything comes during bar prep. But I did take evidence my second semester 3L year, and it just made bar prep easier because I had just taken the class. But yeah, I would agree with you otherwise for the most part.
Yeah, great. And I agree, Nate. I took evidence as well. Classes like business organizations, students will figure out that there are some classes that are pretty hefty, that are heavily bar tested as well. And so those classes, of course, if you have a passion for those classes, or if you have any sort of interest, of course, there's nothing wrong with taking them. But taking every single class that's going to be on the bar exam just to say that it'll help you pass the bar exam doesn't exactly mean that, right? You're going to relearn a lot of things when you study for the bar exam. So it's nice to sort of give yourself a bit of a breather there. Question I want to ask you all is now in the chat box or in the Q&A box. I'm going to encourage our attendees to throw questions in there because we have about 15 minutes before we log off. But questioner says, as a Villanova Law alumni, what do you believe sets you apart from other candidates in the legal field? And what was the most important lesson you took away or took with you from your time at Villanova? Don't worry, you can think about this one. So.
Well, I think one reason I was attracted to Villanova Law is because of the emphasis on Catholic social work and doing right by others. And Villanova does a great job of investing in public interest because it has a PIF program that gives out very generous grants for summer for people doing public interest work. They raise a lot of money through the auction. And it has a very strong alumni network that means that those programs are well supported. So, I think that really was particularly helpful, and it has really great facilities. I mean, the law school is still, that building has only been around for 14 years. It's very nice, and it's in a beautiful area as well, of course. And so I think just like that really drew me in, is that there was this focus on doing good works. And I think it's even increased more since I left, because now there's an anti-poverty symposium every year. They've really expanded the PIF program and the student loan assistance repayment program that they have, and added even more courses on poverty and civil rights. I think it all goes back to that, over the principles that the school is grounded in and that it seeks to advance. So I think that's what really inspired me to go there, and why I'm proud to be a Villanova Law alum.
Yeah, I can chime in. I know, from people I went to law school with, there's just a really great network, especially for corporate law and in-house opportunities. If you're interested in corporate law, like as a student, to get those in-house externships, I know that's the strength of the school. But for me personally, I think one thing that's that I've consistently at least received positive feedback has been like my writing, and I had a strong first year legal writing class with Professor Edelman, and then an absolutely great class 3L year with Professor Sirico, is no longer with us, unfortunately, but his advanced legal writing class was just like a monumental moment of my career. Was just I still use like many of the tips and techniques that he taught us that semester, like to this day. So just like really, and evidence, Professor Dempsey was, just once again, just incredible technical teachings that like really, I do think, I can't speak to like other professors at other schools, but for me personally, seeing where I am relative to, colleagues that I've interacted with from other schools in jobs and professional settings, like I think have been a distinguishing factor.
Yeah, I think on a similar note, along with the alumni network, I think Villanova just as a whole, based on, its undergrad programs, its basketball programs, just has good name recognition, especially in the Northeast. And so when people hear that you went to Villanova Law, they just associate it with the larger, Villanova community, and that's reassuring to people. And I'm always worried, and I know that sometimes incoming law students are very worried about, rankings and things like that. But I mean, we're getting the same jobs as people who did go to Harvard and Stanford and Yale Law. And so I think the name recognition and the alumni network sort of make that all possible.
I would actually second that too. I was thinking that as well. The name recognition, like, it sounds silly, but the basketball wins actually do help generate name recognition, because I would say all of the schools in kind of the same tier as Villanova, right? Like in the Northeast, people will recognize the name of the school. Like if you're going outside of the Philly area, like people will recognize Villanova.
Question in here, there's actually two of them that relate to student interaction. So once again, put on your memory cap. How would you describe how classmates interacted with each other? So if you think about yourself and your peers, would you say it's more collaborative? Would you say that it was more competitive? I always tell people I feel like there's obviously going to be an element of competitive spirit behind law school, because of course lawyers are in essence like somewhat competitive, right? In nature, you want to win, you want to represent your client and win. And so there's going to be an element of that, and or potentially an element of you personally trying to work hard for the goals that you set for yourself. But how would you all, or maybe just, if a few of you want to share about whether you would say that your classmates and you were more collaborative in nature, or if there was more of a cutthroat competitive environment between you and your peers?
I didn't really feel that it was cutthroat at all. Like, you hear stories at other schools, I think, of like people sabotaging other people's notes in the library or something like that. Like that is not the case here. I mean, there are maybe, in any law school, there's like a couple of people that you call them gunners, where they're like, always raising their hand in class, and they're just very keen to like seem like they know everything. But that's like a large minority. I did not find it to be like cutthroat. I felt very collaborative. I was, I'd have certain people I'd study with. We'd all try to help each other out. It wasn't, nobody was trying to mess the other person up in terms of like their performance on an exam.
I agree. And I think the competitiveness kind of settles down after like first semester, when people are, people think like law school is going like a movie. And they're like, well, I have to, study this and carry around this textbook. And then people kind of realize like, no, we're all in this together. I do think that the Villanova has smaller class sizes than a lot of law schools, and I thought that was really helpful in terms of like, I feel like I at least would recognize the name of everybody in my graduating class, even if I wasn't, friends with them or talk to them very much. And so I think that fosters a pretty good sense of community.
I think that, well, I'll be a little honest. I did think that there was a lot of competition early in the first year. I did feel that and sense that, and it could be intimidating at times. And I agree with Nate that you don't want to be a gunner, and those people were really annoying. Don't be like, sitting up in the front, always raising your hand and everything, and constantly trying and constantly like being arrogant. I didn't even know what the concept of a law school gunner was until I was in law school. So now, if you're out there, you'll remember this now before you begin law school. But I agree also with Katie that it definitely settled down after the first year, and that's really when I started to kind of find my group and my friends. And as Nate also said, like, I have lifelong friends who are from law school. I just had my wedding last September, made a table like full of like my law school friends, and so I keep in touch with them regularly, and it's I think a testament to the nature of the friendships at Villanova Law that was the case.
Nate, this question is for you in particular, Nate Stanger. What would you say to a student, and obviously preliminary, right? It's really early, but what would you say to a student that's unsure whether they want to work in-house or for a law firm? And obviously you transitioned from a large law firm in Philadelphia to working in-house. So do you have any sort of tips or advice for someone that's maybe on the fence?
Yeah, sure. I would say just keep your eyes and ears open for, and be open to any opportunity, really. Like, it's kind of too early to make the decision, because I feel like you don't really know what you like until for me, I didn't know what I liked doing until I was doing it. I was good at ruling things out. Like, okay, I did this and I don't like it, and I did X and I don't like it. So like, actually, when I started at my law firm, like, I was like very keen to, like, I want to meet partner. Like, I love it here. Right. And then a couple of years go by and I was like, when I first started my law firm, I couldn't fathom going in-house. And then after I was there for a couple of years, I was like, okay, I have to go in-house. I definitely don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So I would just say be open to, like, the opportunities. There are some people who come in and they know exactly what they want to do, and that's fine. But I think also, for me at least, it was important to rule out, and I'm still ruling out in my life. So I'm happy in-house, but like, I'm still encountering new assets I work on that maybe I don't like and I don't want to work on. And I know it helps me narrow more what I like to do if I know what I don't like to do.
This one's going to send you all back for sure. So to the best of your recollection, thinking about studying for finals, and maybe that's like a bit of a nightmare to go back to. But the question says, what tips do you have for an incoming law student about studying for exams? And maybe you can think back now and say to yourself, this was the right move for finals, and this was maybe the wrong move. Anything come to mind that you would share as advice for law school exams?
To do the practice exams that the professors give, and to not be afraid to ask professors questions in office hours, and to keep your eyes on the big picture, not get lost in the details of facts about different cases. And that's something that then I remembered when I was studying for the bar exam. Like, oh wow, it's really that big picture black letter law that is important, the big issues, because that's what you do. I remember Professor Ravenel, who I had for civil procedure and for a couple other classes, said, like, when you're actually a lawyer, it's not like people are coming to me like, tell me about the facts of this case. They have new facts, new things that you have to deal with, and then you apply the law and analysis to their facts. And that really is what final exams are all about. So it's very different from any other kind of writing that you did. And it's very writing heavy and all about, like, mastering the art of, like, being able to identify an issue and figure out how the law applies to the facts of that new case that you have in your exam.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I mean, dovetailing off that, it's just like, pay attention to tests, like, when there's a 4-part test to analyze a certain issue. Like, that's a key thing that probably probably show up on the exam, or is something that should be in your outline that you prepare. Pay attention to past questions. There's teachers sometimes give you, sample analyses, like in a class. Here's a sample exam question, and you go through it and pay attention to, like, what the analysis would be there. And then I think, don't be afraid to talk to 2Ls, 3Ls who have gone through it before, and ask them what their experience was like sitting for particular exams, and use your network.
And if I can jump in really quickly before we get to the next question, the one thing that pops up for me, just even from my personal experience, is office hours. I think that office hours is very valuable, and I think that oftentimes students wait until the end of the semester, myself included, to go to professors for office hours, and that's when everybody is going to the professor for office hours. And so it's oftentimes to your benefit to start that relationship up earlier. It doesn't have to be the first or second week of the semester, but as time progresses, if you have questions, it's best to get to them early on than later on, when everybody's trying to get the professor's attention to review for finals. Question is about wellness. Did you all have time for family and friends in law school? What did you do as sort of an outlet for wellness? I'll throw something out. I know a lot of people would, let's say, go to the gym, right? Make time to get away from the law school building, go to the Davis Center. What did you all do to sort of balance law school with your well-being mentally? And yeah, did you have time for family and friends?
Yes, I do have time for family and friends, and you should absolutely make time for that. That's more important than anything ever. That should be your number one priority, truly. Your mental health and being in touch with family and friends and being engaged with them and having those relationships, you'll never regret that. And that's more important. If things come up that are really important and serious, even you should attend to those before you worry about your law school responsibilities, frankly. And I make time in important ways. So actually, for the first years of law school, my wife and I, at that time, we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and we were long distance. She was in DC and I was at Villanova, and so I would make sure to visit her often. She would come visit me, so we really like made time for each other, be on the phone a lot. I would go to the gym regularly as well. That was really good to like be able to stay in shape and like really release stresses. I got to know really great friends in law school, hung out with friends in Philly who I had from before, friends from college who had moved to Philly. You do have time on the weekends more than you would think. Like at first, like when I started law school, people who were lawyers who I had gotten advice from were like, "Oh, you're gonna have no time for any fun at all. It's miserable. It's terrible." But no, you do have time, and like it is important, and you'll feel better for having done that. It'll ultimately actually benefit you in your law school pursuits as well. That you made time to do that, and then you won't be like sad and more stressed.
I was arguably like too chill in law school. I took naps every day. I went to all the workout classes I would have gone to in New York. They have them on the main line. There's a lot of really good restaurants on the main line. And then obviously you have Philly nearby. And for those of you in Philly, I would almost any night that I could, I would look on Resi and see if Zahav had a reservation. And if it did, I would take it and I would go. And it didn't matter, what was happening the next day. I just thought I need this. So I think doing that, there were probably Monday and Tuesday, I would do all of my readings for the entire week, which is kind of psychotic, but I would do it because then for the rest of the week, I'd be very calm. I'd have 2 pretty miserable days, and then I'd be calm and not stressed about things that I had to get done. And so, I think if you go into law school with the mindset that like, an hour of extra studying a day probably won't make the difference between, a 4.0 GPA and a, whatever GPA. And you kind of go in with the mindset of, I don't need to make this my whole life. This is just part of my life. And I'm going to do the best I can at it, but sort of not at the expense of, my happiness and my well-being, because you definitely see some people who make it their whole life and they suffer for it. If you just sort of go in with a balanced mentality, and it'll take you some time to find the balance, but once you do, just cherish it, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we're running close on time here. Final question. I want each of you to answer it. Maybe give me 20 seconds max. Why Villanova?
I can go first. I think, and part of the reason I accepted was because the facilities are really nice. Like as compared to a number of other schools I was looking at, that was a really actually differentiating factor to me. And I think that the professors as well are great. We've talked about that a bit. I think I have a lot of professors that I really value and that I still try and stay in touch with. Great academia there, and just the community of people there was really amazing. The friends I made. So those are my 3 highlights as to why.
So my mom went to Villanova. my best friend went to Villanova, so in college, I always was there visiting her. And my sister actually graduated Villanova undergrad on the same day that I graduated from Villanova Law School. So that's why I applied to Villanova. But I agree with Nate. When I went to visit and I saw the facilities and I met some of the people who work there and some students that were there at the time, that's kind of what sold me, because it was sort of the opposite of, you know, the movie law school mentality where everyone's very cutthroat and mean, and it was a very welcoming environment, and I appreciated that.
Great facilities, great professors who are really cool, very strong alumni network, really good location, lifelong friends, very good clinical and experiential learning programs, and strong principles related to using the law to help others and lift up the poor.
Yeah, elevator pitch would be career opportunities, like Katie said. I mean, access to all the big law firms in Philadelphia, some ties to New York if that's where you want to wind up. But yeah, strong alumni network, big law access if that's what you want to do. Other career opportunities, follow, you know, in the Philly area, like Omeed, like me, not with a big law firm, but a Villanova alum here. A lot of Villanova alums who are, you know, in the, you know, mass tort, personal injury field in Philadelphia and surrounding area. So, yeah, ultimately it's a professional school and you're looking to build a career coming out of the, you know, out of all the hard work you'll put in as a law student. And I think Villanova, you really can't beat the opportunities on the other side.